Before tackling the problem of free will in the criminal justice system, I need to tell you about Daniel Monotone. Daniel was born in Glasgow in 1813. He was the illegitimate son of a man of the same name and a woman called Ada. For most of his life, nothing remarkable happened that justifies his inclusion in this video. He was a woodturner like his father and an actor for a little while. Additionally, he was described as an industrious and sober person, which was quite remarkable for 1800s Scotland. However, in 1841, as he was 28 years old, he began complaining to people that he was being persecuted and spied on by one of the political parties in the country, whose leader was Robert Peel, the Prime Minister at the time. For 2 years, Daniel complained to people who dismissed the accusations. 2 years of a constant feeling of being persecuted led Daniel to do something about it. And, in a cold London night, in January 3rd of 1843, Daniel murdered the personal assistant of the Prime Minister, having thought he was the Prime Minister himself. Daniel stood trial, and nothing leading to that point would have allowed anyone to predict the outcome. The court deemed Daniel insane, and, instead of punishing him through a prison sentence, he was sent to a mental institution. This was so revolutionary for the time that the discontentment of the people culminated on the courts having to somehow justify their decision. This justification came in a set of rules. The Monotone rules are the legal basis upon which most laws regarding defenses by insanity refer to. Daniel literally revolutionized the world of law and connected it to the realm of psychology and philosophy. Indeed, mitigated free will, the core belief that underlies the establishment of the Monotone rules, and most criminal justice systems in the world, is one of the core topics of this video. Here, I will show you how people's beliefs about free will influence our criminal justice systems around the world, and, while teaching you some psychological concepts, show you some possible ways to improve them. This is the psychology of everything. First of all, what is free will? Well, trying to put it simply, it is something that is not compatible to determinism. Determinism suggests there is only one possible course of action, and, therefore, that course of action can be determined. For example, imagine yourself throwing a rock. If I know all the variables, such as the weight and shape of the rock, the force with which it is thrown, and the wind resistance, I will probably be able to determine exactly where the rock will land. The scientific discipline that makes that determination is physics. Another example, imagine a hungry dog, and that he can choose something to eat between super great food and not so tasty one. I could probably determine with about 99% accuracy that the dog will eat, and, more spectacularly, what he will eat. The scientific disciplines responsible for that determination are both physics and biology. Now, imagine that instead of a dog, you have a hungry human, and you present him with two food items, a piece of delicious and nutritious pork steak, and a bowl of bland, tasteless rice. In order to be able to determine what food the human would choose with some degree of certainty, I would need to know where he grew up, his religion, his cultural beliefs, his level of commitment to a vegetarian diet, etc. The disciplines responsible for these determinations are not only physics and biology, but also psychology, sociology, theology, among others. One of the important aspects that leads us to deny human determinism is that when we make decisions, we are usually blind to all of the factors that guide them. We feel ourselves making choices, but we don't feel our blood sugar levels. We can't feel our levels of testosterone, dopamine, and serotonin. We can't access our personality biases or other more contextual types of biases. The matter of humans' free will is not qualitatively different from other animals. It is just more complex. And human behavior is just harder to scientifically determine than other beings. However, scientific advances and its consequent impact on our perception of free will can lead to rather comical historical anecdotes. Take, for example, a trial in France in 1457. The incident that led up to this was the murder of a boy by a female pig, while her 6 baby piglets were present. All 7 of them stood trial. There were 3 lawyers present and 9 witnesses were called to testify. And I swear I'm not making this up. The result? The mama pig was sentenced to death as the ringleader, the mastermind behind the murder. However, the cubs, due to their young age, were released. Probably because they were too young to be in control of their own actions, unlike their mother. Besides the funny underpinnings of this story, this illustrates how when it comes to free will, humans are used to draw arbitrary lines in the sand, that science with time washes away. Today, considering any pig responsible for their actions would be laughable, and, as a consequence, so would be punishing them for committing a crime. While most people agree that pigs should not be arrested or killed as punishment for their actions, the case is not the same for humans. The criminal justice system is a very contentious topic. While most agree that dangerous people should be isolated from the rest of the population, when topics such as punishment, rehabilitation and death sentences are brought up, there is no possible consensus. And, in order to get some type of understanding of what to do, we need to know what is the supposed goal of the criminal justice system. There are basically 4 perspectives on what its goal is: punishment, incapacitation, dissuasion, and rehabilitation. And every country has a mix of some of these perspectives. The punishment perspective is pretty self-explanatory. It derives from a moral belief on retribution. It is the moral equivalent to an eye for an eye. This perspective allows for things such as death sentences and stuff like that. In this view, the goal of the prison system is to punish. The incapacitation perspective mirrors what I said before. Dangerous people should be isolated from the rest of the population. The goal is to prevent crimes by incapacitating people that are likely to commit them. For example, if a dangerous person is locked in a prison, that person is incapable of committing a crime. The goal, in this perspective, is to prevent crimes by isolating dangerous people from the general population. The dissuasion perspective argues that the threat of punishment leads people to commit less crimes out of fear. For some time, that was an argument in favor of death sentences, because it was argued that when people saw executions, they were less likely to commit crimes. That assertion has been largely proven false. So, the goal in this perspective is to dissuade crimes through harsh sentences. Finally, there is the rehabilitative perspective, where the goal of the criminal justice system is to give convicted felons the tools to reintegrate in society and to go on to be law-abiding citizens. For example, in America there's a big focus on punishment and incapacitation, while in Norway there's a strong focus on rehabilitation. It's no wonder that the USA has got a prison population of 2 million people, while the total in the world is 10 million. America has 20% of the worldwide prison population, while having only 4% of the world's total population, while Norway has one of the lowest recidivism rates in the world. Remember the 4 perspectives? Do they work at reducing crime and increasing safety? Let's find out. Let's see which of them seems to be more effective. First, punishment is the only one for which a cost analysis is impossible, because the punishment is the goal itself, so I'll leave it out. What about the others? Evidence suggests that incapacitation is not very effective at reducing crime in the long term, because although while people are in prison they cannot commit crimes, the longer they are in prison, the higher the recidivism rate is when they get out, meaning that longer sentences lead to more crimes committed in the long term. And it is really expensive, by the way. Additionally, studies show that dissuasion by means of tougher sentences also doesn't work, as, when asked, most inmates in a study reported that when committing a crime, they were unaware of the possible sentence duration and severity. If they didn't even know the possible punishment, how could it dissuade them? Additionally, I suppose that dissuasion could be accomplished not by harsher sentences, but by better economic conditions. Studies show that poverty is one of the main drivers of delinquence and criminality. Could people be dissuaded by having more to lose? That is a very likely yes. Finally, rehabilitation. Indeed, this is the only perspective that has shown consistent results in reducing crime and recidivism in the long term, and, amazingly, is the one more congruent with a deterministic view of human will, as the goal is not to punish, but to give people the tools to integrate in society and ultimately increase its safety. So now I ask, should criminal justice systems be substantially reformed? Should governments have the power to decide who to punish for punishment's sake? Or should their decisions have a utilitarian basis? Even if we forget humanitarian and empathic arguments relative to the well-being of inmates, even if we don't care if they die or are wrongly accused, shouldn't governments just care to reduce criminality and increase safety? Well, the answer seems pretty obvious to me. As I mentioned in the beginning, mitigated free will is the basis of the current format of the criminal justice system. Proponents of mitigated free will basically assume that our impulses have a biological nature and consequently are determined. Think of impulses such as hunger, yawning, willingness to sleep, but also anger and the impulse to beat or kill someone. On the other hand, the ability to control our impulses, that exists in a realm of free will. Well, considering the first chapter, you know where I stand on this. This perspective is wrong because it is an arbitrary line in the sand. Resisting temptation involves as much biology as does temptation itself. Mitigated free will is what allows for the monotone rules to exist, the defenses by insanity, because craziness, hallucinations, or brain damage remove the remaining part of free will that you possessed and substitute it for biological influences outside your control. This is ridiculous. This explanation by Sapolsky illustrates the ridiculousness of mitigated free will very well. So, here's how I've always imagined free will. There's the brain, neurons, synapses, neurotransmitters, receptors, brain-specific transcription factors, epigenetic effects, gene transpositions during neurogenesis, and then, separate from that, in a concrete bunker tucked away in the brain, sits a little man, or woman, or agendered individual, a homunculus at a control panel. The homunculus is made of a mixture of nanochips, old vacuum tubes, crinkly, ancient parchment, stalactites of your mother's admonishing voice. In other words, not squishy biological brain stuff. And the homunculus sits there controlling behavior. There are some things outside its purview. Seizures blow the homunculus fuses, requiring it to reboot the system and check for damaged files. Same with alcohol, Alzheimer's disease, a several spinal cord, hypoglycemic shock, or hallucinations, as was the case of Daniel. But, other than that, the homunculus makes decisions. A homunculus in your brain, but not of it, operating independently of the material rules of the universe that constitute modern science. I strongly argue that criminal justice systems around the world need to start dissociating themselves with this Middle Ages view and start letting science lead structural reforms. If at this point you are still on the fence and somehow think that the criminal justice system has a semblance of fairness, consider the following. It is estimated that 50 to 80% of incarcerated people have had traumatic brain injuries. At least 15% of people in US prisons have severe mental illness. Additionally, human beings are extremely biased, and, last I checked, judges and juries are human. Consider a study where men were asked numerous questions either while they were in a normal state or when they were aroused. Can you imagine being attracted to a 12-year-old girl and a 60-year-old woman? Could you imagine getting sexually excited by contact with an animal? The answer to all of these questions is that you are more likely to say yes to them if you are aroused. Indeed, all of the questions show the same result. If you are aroused, you are more likely to answer yes to all of these questions. Except one. Can you imagine having sex with a man? That's the only question where being aroused didn't make a difference. I tell you this only to illustrate that our biases sometimes come from where we least expect, and the same is true in the criminal justice system. For example, a study showed that while black and white inmates with similar records were given roughly similar sentences, inmates with more Afrocentric facial features, meaning having more stereotypically African traits, received harsher ones. Other, even more unexpected study shows that judges were more likely to give out harsher decisions the more time passed, since the judge ate for the last time. Although there is some controversy about the original effect size, it seems that indeed, judges' hunger has some influence on their decisions. So, is the current system fair? No, it's not. Should we have a more instrumentalist perspective that not only diminishes recidivism, treats humans as people, and saves money in the long term, as rehabilitation programs have shown to do? The answer seems pretty obvious to me. So how can I end this video? I want to tell you a little story. So when I started researching how to do YouTube scripts, I found that most people told me to do a very formulaic approach. Start with a hook at the beginning to grab the viewer and finish with a call to action. When I first saw that, I was genuinely excited because I thought I should end my videos urging my viewers to take action, to apply the things they just learned and try to improve the world in some way. However, that formulaic call to action instead was meant to ask people to subscribe, like, whatever, which was just sad. So I wanted to end this video and hopefully all others with a real call to action. So if you are wondering how to do something about what we just talked about, here are some little tips for you. First, vote for representatives or politicians who genuinely care about the subject and that present clear plans to steer criminal justice in the right way. Second, study and learn more about whatever topic is relevant to you and fight for it. Protest, whatever. Search for organizations in your area and donate to them or volunteer. And lastly, convince people that, at least when it comes to criminal justice, our perspectives on free will matter a lot. Now, can you see these videos? Do you think you have free will? I know which one you will choose. I really know. Yeah, that's the one. Take care.